Hi, my name is Malcolm Travers, and welcome to the M3 Bearcast. In this episode, I am changing things up a bit. And the reason for that is I have long since wanted to do something different than the live stream. We've been very consistent about the live stream, except when our guests or hosts are unavailable. And I'm recording this the weekend of Thanksgiving. And Saturday, we were going to have a live stream with Greg. He hosts one every Saturday at noon, but he was with family, and most of our guests were with family as well. So I recorded a clip show, and I realized, like, under the pressure, I was able to make a clip show that was about 30 minutes long fairly quickly. And the reason why is because a lot of planning goes into the live stream. I'm actually planning the topics weeks in advance. The only thing is I don't want to record or republish the live streams. I want the podcast to be something new that listeners can dive into. So what I'm going to do is give my thoughts on the topics that I'm going to bring up in the live stream. So patrons will get a 24-hour advance podcast. They will also be able to see the video. And for our general audience, you'll be able to listen to this every Tuesday. My live stream is every Wednesday at 7:30. So going into the podcast, if you're a fan, you can get an idea of what we're going to be talking about. First of all, I want to talk about romance and pragmatism. Is something that has come up several times when we've discussed love and romance and sex, that Greg tends to be a hopeless romantic, and myself, I tend to be practical or jaded, however you want to look at it. But I wanted to talk about one of the downsides of over romanticizing love. And that is the fact that love can be difficult. Love is a difficult thing because life is difficult. Loving ourselves is difficult. Loving someone else when they are difficult with us is difficult. People are difficult, right? So I think even hopeless romantics recognize this fact, but I think there is a tendency to believe that if the person is right for you, that these problems will resolve themselves. And what I want to emphasize in the discussion is to say, these are things that we have to work on. Love does come naturally, yes. The more you're compatible with someone, the easier it is, or the more fruitful the work is of love. But have no mistake, love is work. Getting to know someone is work. And so if you're going to be in a long-term relationship, one has to grow with that person, travel along the road of life with them. And that means making difficult choices. And that isn't to scare us away from the work. It is absolutely fulfilling work. But I think romanticizing it somewhat cheapens it, to say that a successful long-term relationship where both partners felt needed, felt wanted, felt a part of something, and are still able to maintain their independence is a remarkable thing. I'm going to play this on the live stream Wednesday. So let me go to that and I will comment on it on the other side.
I resented the world for treating me like I was difficult to love until I figured out what it looked like to love myself. And then I realized the world was right. I am difficult to love. We all are. But it's not because we're difficult or because we're broken as humans. It's because love is a difficult thing. It is difficult for me to spend the quality time with myself that I need, especially when I have other things vying for my time, my attention, my energy. It is difficult for me to forgive myself, reassure myself, and trust myself after I've made a mistake more than one time. It is difficult for me to look at the parts of myself that have been shamed into the dark corners of my psyche and tell them that they are safe to exist here. It's difficult for me to not be judgmental towards myself in those moments. It's difficult for me to not hide myself away. And that stuff doesn't even scratch the surface, right? There's also this day-to-day aspect of love. How often do you get that first look in the mirror and tell yourself, I'm happy to see you? How often are we wishing ourselves a good day on the way out the door? Consciously taking a second to say, I really hope I have a good day on the way out the door. And when you look in the mirror after getting ready and you acknowledge that you feel like shit, how often are you also turning around and saying, you're beautiful to me, no matter what? We make love this all-consuming thing and then resent people for treating it like it's heavy. But it is heavy. Love is a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to show people, especially consistently. All of us are going to struggle with that in some way, in some form. So when I realized how difficult it was to actually love myself, I stopped resenting the world for treating me like I was difficult to love because I realized that it's not me. I am not the difficult thing. Love is. So when I see people trying to love me, making an effort in that direction, I'm grateful because I know how hard that is. And I'm grateful that they're willing to carry that weight for me.
So that was from I am Tori Reed on TikTok. I will include a link to the original video in the podcast notes. And I think I really underestimated how much self-love plays into loving someone else. And I had forgotten about exactly what she said until I listened to the clip again, and saying that exactly what I said before, that love is a difficult thing, but the way that we can show love to someone else is to first begin to show love for ourselves, recognizing that making time for oneself, listening to yourself, telling yourself that you love you, to make quality time when you have other things on your agenda that you need to do. I do believe that self-love is the way to first learn how to love. I've been reading a lot of books on psychology, child development, mental health issues, and so forth. Attachment theory comes up a lot. And one of the things that they talk about in attachment theory is, as very young children, we are almost inseparable from our mothers. And then we begin to have an identity of self, and that can be scary. So sometimes we will create attachment objects to make us feel safe, like teddy bears or blankets or whatever. And when your mother is away, you will basically use this as a substitute until you can fully master being independent, because being completely consumed by your mother or your parent or caregiver and then going out into the world is scary. And so I think the same could be true of loving someone else, trusting someone else. I think trusting someone to not take you for granted or purposefully hurt you begins with trusting yourself, trusting that you know when someone is lying to you, and trusting yourself when you know you're being treated badly. I think a lot of times when we're in shitty situations, say not even all the way up to abusive, but just toxic relationships, means that we haven't drawn the boundaries of what is acceptable to us because we haven't loved on ourselves enough to know what is okay and what isn't. We need to be loved. We're built for love. And so when someone offers it to us, it can be consuming to people. It can make people make compromises that are against their own self-interest. And so I remember having this conversation on the live stream a few times, saying, the RuPaul quote saying, how the hell are you going to love someone else if you can't love yourself? Or I think that's how it goes. And there's a lot of truth to that. I didn't want to believe it in absolutes, and I don't. I do believe that people who don't love themselves can love someone else. But I do want to make it clear to everyone who's listening to this that self-love is the first step into loving someone else. It is. I mean, you can stumble into a good relationship not loving yourself and still love them, but let's not do that, right? Let's be intentional and begin with loving yourself so that you aren't going to put up with bullshit. If you treat yourself well and someone who you are in a relationship with doesn't treat you well, you can immediately recognize on an emotional level, not even needing to intellectualize this bad treatment, like, hold up, wait a minute. This is not love, this is some selfish bullshit. You can let it go because you still have yourself. You can feel empowered to leave much more easily. In the same way that we talked about the attachment theories with children leaving their parents, using something, basically soothing themselves in order to separate from our parents, right? In the same way, self-love gives you the freedom to leave bad situations, or even situations that are no longer serving you, just taking time and recognizing, like, you made one too many compromises. If you love yourself, you have more confidence to leave that situation. So I'm definitely going to bring up more tactics for self-love and talk about how I love on myself. I've noticed one of the things for me that means a lot is cleaning up my computer, sometimes my files, since I do a lot of work on my computer, cleaning my room, organizing things. And I think the reason that is that when I am in a junky environment, those items around me are constantly reminding me that I have more things to do, and it creates this sort of anxiety. And so I can imagine similarly being in a relationship. One way of showing love to my partner might be cleaning up the house and having it straight in a certain way, making things comfortable for us to, nest in. So, that would be something, as an example for myself. I would tell someone, like, this is something I do for myself, and now this is something I can do for you. And being with someone else who also has whatever self-care routines for themselves, figuring out, like, what can I do for you to help you feel more comfortable, make you feel loved, And so I do believe, like, self-care and self-love are keys to understanding how we want to be loved and how to love someone else. So, even if I don't believe in the absolute statement that you can't love someone else when you don't love yourself, self-love is key to maintaining a good, healthy relationship. All right, on to the next clip.
So in the video I posted last night, I shared that I was in a situationship with a guy that had a girlfriend, and we would constantly argue about the fact that he would not leave his girlfriend for me. So one time I got fed up and I was like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to her and I'm going to tell her what he's doing, because in my delusional mind, I thought that I was going to break them up and he would have no other choice but to be with me. Now, I know that there's some women who reach out because they realize y'all are being taken advantage of by the same person and they're just trying to get, let you know. But with pick-me's, they're hoping that they'll break y'all up so that they can get your man. So I reach out to her and we talk. I call her on the phone and this woman is crying. She is so distraught. She is so sad. Because she really loves this man. She thought their relationship was solid. And as she's crying and sobbing, I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. But I was eating up every second of it. And this is why pick-me's are dangerous, because they are willing to do almost anything to get the man that they want. Even if that man has told them that they don't want them, even if there's no indication that they will have any kind of real future together, a pick-me is going to do whatever she thinks she has to do to get the man that she wants. Women's correctional facilities are full of women who committed a crime over a man that they wanted. They stole for that man. They took somebody's life for that man. They beat up for that man. They destroyed property for that man. They did something for that man's approval. Some pick-me's will put you in dangerous situations if it means them getting attention from a man. Now, was this girl's man trash? Yeah. Should she have, been told the truth? Yeah. But my motives were totally wrong. If you're friends with a pick-me, stop. Stop it right in that friendship now.
So I realized that listening to this video, I had to listen to it 2 or 3 times to try to put myself in the mindset of this woman. I have never heard of the term pick me, but I assume that it's very similar to being a narcissist. Clearly some issues with self-worth, right? I don't know anyone who settled for scraps the way that this woman was talking. Getting in a situationship with someone and then somehow expecting him to leave her, leave his partner for her is straight up delusional, right? And I think she recognizes this. But one of the things I noticed, and you won't be able to see it because it's a podcast, but on the live stream you will, and I will link to this woman's video. It's actually a stitch of someone else's video. I will link to the original. And one of the things that comes up when I watch the video is that she has a little bit of a smile on her face as she talks about informing the woman of the fact that she is with her mate, right? She got off on it. She got off on the pain, and even recollecting situation, the call, she had a little residual joy on her face. You could see it. And that's really dark. And I appreciate her being honest about it now. but I think there's still a part of her who would do that again, even though she's holding herself accountable by saying it out loud and publishing it on TikTok, But I think that's the first question is like, I can't imagine being that person. However, what she said about having pick-me's as friends is something I have encountered. I have. And I wonder if that same energy comes about with a lot of bottoms on these or in a lot of, high, I don't know, competition backgrounds, or I don't know. But I do see a lot of like total bottoms competing with one another for men, right? Because they believe in this scarcity mindset that, if they find someone that they like, they need to knock down the competition. They need to do what it is to get that person. And I've been friends with people like that. And of course, it eventually came around to injuring myself, right? That when I found someone who I was definitely, head over heels for, talking to them about it was almost like ringing a dinner bell and saying, come get it, And so I think that's just generally speaking, if you see a friend of yours who is treating other people badly, understanding that you're eventually going to be treated the way that they treat others, right? There's no special circumstance where you are immune from the way that they see the world. And I'm still having difficulty imagining the pick mindset. I cannot understand how you can derive joy from hurting someone else in that way. I don't understand how you would want to hurt the person that you're seeing, right? Like, I'm assuming that, like, not only are you going to hurt the woman who believed that her man was good, but you're also going to hurt the person that you're in a situationship with, which I, would think that you have some sort of, care for, So there have been a lot of situations. There's something else that came up. There have been a lot of times where you might be dating someone and you're not aware that they have a significant relationship, or the fact that they're dating multiple people. And the question comes up as to whether or not they should reach out to the other person if they find out. For whatever reason, I'm not exactly sure what I can say is my initial reaction is to inform the other person, whether or not it is from good intentions or not. Like, it is not my business to reach out to the other person to inform them that this person is seeing both of us, right? Because that would be overstepping and it's none of my business what this person thinks. I will say a little prayer for them and, hope that they, get out of that situation unscathed as much as possible. But I think anytime you feel the need to inform the other person, you should question your motives, because I believe well-intentioned people can talk themselves into doing that. But in reality, their intentions have to be in some way infused with malevolence, right? Because they know people are going to get hurt. You don't walk into a situation like that, swinging a bat in a china shop and expecting no one to feel anything. Obviously, you're ready to break some shit. I think you have to question that motive. I get anger and betrayal, but, also understand, self-control, temperance and, higher functioning brain, like, really, it's just a really bad idea. So that's the thing. If you have a friend who is a pick, I've never heard this term before, by the way, it seems really weird. If you have a friend who's like that, I would start to distance myself immediately. I don't know if I would cut myself off, because if this person really is that kind of malevolent person, they very well may retaliate against you if they feel like you're slighting. But I would definitely distance myself. I would start to observe their behavior in more detail. I would definitely limit any of my personal information with that person. I would not let them into my house. definitely not give them access to any of my, like phones or computers or anything. Cause, like this woman said, if they are intent on getting something, they'll do whatever, they will justify any behavior to get someone. And so my second thought on this video is, what creates the mindset of someone like this? I talked about attachment theory in the past, in the last video, and I'm certainly no expert on it, but from what I've read, there's clearly some abuse or neglect in someone's past that would create the mindset that would want to do something like this. And, this woman in the video, even though she's recognizing, what she did in the past, trying to hold herself accountable, I would assume that she would need some therapy to deal with the underlying issues that made that sort of behavior acceptable in the first place. Like, even though she may no longer engage in that activity, the underlying causes that would lead someone to behave that way may not have been addressed. And so I also want to say about those people who behave in this manner that some amount of compassion is okay. That doesn't mean justifying it, doesn't mean allowing it to happen. It certainly means like getting the fuck away from them, but also having a little bit of sympathy, a little bit of empathy for someone who is damaged. Because this sounds like some serious emotional damage that causes someone to be that way. And, she's particularly mentioning women, but I think this applies to basically anyone, maybe anyone who is love starved. It was kind of what it seemed like to me, and willing to compromise for scraps. It's really sad. It's really fucked up. And I can't wait to hear what our panel has to say about when I play this clip on the live stream later. And on that note, I'm going to go to our next clip and talk about it on the other side.
This may be surprised, but if you ask me, white men probably fetishize black men's bodies the most, although not always sexually from a space of gratification, but through this vicarious consumption of black men's bodies. We see it mostly to me in sports, but also in porn, in the arts, etc. We see it in how white men sexualize and castrated black men during lynches. And the most heinous acts of white terrorism from the past, from Rosewood to Tulsa to St. Louis, were often in the name of protecting the virtue of white women from black men. Basically, since slavery, black men's sexuality has been imprisoned by this intersection of racist and misandrous violence. And over time, as with many cultural taboos, in a conservative society, it has turned into genuine fetish and kink. Myths about the size of black men's penis, black men as excellent lovers, the celebration of idealized black men's physiques, a bevy of sex toys meant to resemble the mythologized, disembodied phallus of black men, along with more than a few jokes, tropes, and myths about black men's sexuality. Things that aren't only fetishized by white men and women, but men and women of all races, black women included, and black men as well. Black men today still participate in and or reject this image and what that means for us in terms of sex. To start, and this is something that will be repeated, of all the things stripped from us as men, this mythology is one thing that, while distorted, we still have some level of agency over, and in many ways, it's a key component to some of us finding avenues for success and personal capital through our art.
So this one is a deep one. And I think there are so many layers to what this man was saying. I would make sure to check out the original video. I'm going to link it in the podcast notes. I would say, first of all, the fetishization of black men is something that I find fascinating and disturbing as well. I remember I was going to do this topic for the live stream last week about men who are perceived as ugly, yet they're still sexually attractive. And this tied into the fetishization of black men, specifically by white men, right? I think that's where he starts it off at, is both fear and admiration of black men's bodies and how it ties into the sort of Mandingo fantasy that some people have, the BBC fantasy that is so often talked about in the gay community, that they're just looking for the black dick, not the actual man. And a lot of this ties into the concept of race to begin with. the first concept of race is that Black people were less human than white people. And part of the sexualization of Black men was almost saying how animalistic Black men looked to white people, that they saw us as unattractive by European beauty standards. But not only that, also more aggressive and animal-like because of their beliefs that race made them superior to us. But that didn't necessarily have all negative connotations. If we're less than human, then we are animals at their disposal that can be used for their sexual gratification. And so that's where Mandingo came from, basically, is the idea that enslaved Black men were used as sexual entertainment for white people. And then all these myths about Black men having large penises come from the idea that they chose from thousands of slaves the men with the largest penises, and, you know, spread this myth of the Mandingo man. And it's funny that now we buy into this misconception. I mean, why not? I benefit from it, right? Myself. And yeah, I would say that we have to be aware of where these tropes come from, even when they're positive, even as we benefit from them. Because as I think about it, my Instagram page is filled with Black men's bodies, right? I am trying to show thickness as beauty and to recognize that European beauty standards do not necessarily apply to Black men, that we can find ourselves beautiful as gay men and not strive or attempt to be white, like loving ourselves as ourselves. And that's a lot about what the images are, but also just celebrating the fact that there are other people like myself who are gay, who have the eye that I have. What they find attractive is what I find attractive. But at the same time, there's this thin line where there are those who fetishize Black men who come to the page, right? And I necessarily have to read their comments because I'm a good manager on my page, at least when I am. I can't say I'm 100% consistent, but, you know, there can be moments where I cringe at some of the comments that people make because of how they perceive Black men. And I'm feeding that to them on a silver platter, right? I don't really have much control over the fact that these are their kinks or their fetishes or their very narrow view of Black male sexuality. But I am feeding into it, and I have to acknowledge that. So the next thing I would say is that concept of ugly hot. Going back to it, it did actually make sense to me when viewed through this Mandingo lens, because, you know, as much as we are pressured to live up to European beauty standards of the way that, you know, because of the media that we consume, because of the people in power who make the decisions as to what is beautiful or considered beautiful, we absorb a lot of that. And for the most part, we have to undo that process and begin to love ourselves as ourselves, not through the white gaze. But when I think about the white gaze, I wonder what they see, because because they have their own beauty standards, and looking at us, I'm just assuming that there is a certain amount of attraction and revulsion also, right? That certain Black men present a almost threat, but that fear is also attractive. Like the threat of aggression that they have perceived is also sexually arousing, you know? And I thought about that with some of the, like what he mentioned in porn, that there'll be these people who are not attractive in the traditional sense. In fact, they're maybe have a butter face. You know what I'm saying? Like everything on their body is beautiful, but their face, even by conventional beauty standards, not necessarily Eurocentric beauty standards. Like, you know, they have a rough looking face, but their attractiveness comes from their aggressive behavior, by their aggressive nature, by being that Mandingo fantasy. And even Black people buy into it. Like I've watched many a porn that buys into Mandingo fantasies, but I think I am going to put this video on social media, actually, and see what people say about it. Like tomorrow, I think I'll post it, and I'll mention that I'm going to talk about it on the podcast. So, yeah, I'm flummoxed by this video, and I can't wait to talk about it with Greg and John. So make sure to join us Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. That's mailmediamind.com. Subscribe, hit the bell. You'll be notified when we go live. Greg has his show as well on Saturday at noon, and Devon has his show Sunday at 5. You can be notified of all of those when you subscribe. Thank you for listening to M3 Bearcast, and I will catch you in the next episode.